The morning sun had just started to peek through the thin curtains of a small apartment on the third floor of an old building. Inside, an 8-year-old girl named Lily was already awake. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the worn-out violin case resting against the wall. Today was the day she had been waiting for. Today was the day that could change everything. Her mother was in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of toast filled the tiny apartment, worked as a cleaner at a hospital nearby. She took the early morning shifts and the late night ones too. Most days, Lily only saw her mother for a few hours, but never complained. She always said that hard work was the price you paid for your dreams. Lily picked up the violin case and held it close to her chest. This violin had a story of its own. 2 years ago, Lily and her grandmother had been walking through a weekend market when they spotted it sitting in a pile of broken things at a second-hand stall. The strings were missing. The wood was cracked in 2 places. The man selling it wanted almost nothing for it because he said it was just junk. But Lily's grandmother saw something different. She saw possibility. Her grandmother had been a music teacher once, many years ago, before her hands became too weak to play. She looked at that broken violin and told Lily that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from what others throw away. They bought it for just a few dollars and carried it home like it was made of gold. Over the next several months, Lily and her grandmother worked on that violin together. They watched videos online to learn how to fix it. They saved up money to buy new strings. Her grandmother showed her how to hold the bow and where to place her fingers. Lily remembered those afternoons so clearly. The two of them sitting by the window, sunlight warming their faces, the sound of music slowly coming to life under Lily's small hands. Her grandmother always believed in her, even when Lily made mistakes, even when the sounds coming from the violin were rough and scratchy. Her grandmother would just smile and say that every great musician once sounded like a beginner. She told Lily to keep going, to never give up, to trust that one day all those hours of practice would turn into something beautiful. But then 3 months ago, everything changed. Lily's grandmother got very sick. It happened fast. One week she was laughing and teaching Lily a new song. The next week she was in the hospital, too weak to even sit up. Lily visited her every day after school. She would sit beside her grandmother's bed and play the violin softly, hoping the music would somehow make her stronger. On one of those visits, her grandmother held her hand and made her promise something. She told Lily that there was a big talent competition coming up. It was called the National Young Talent Championship, and kids from all over the country would be there. Her grandmother said she wanted Lily to enter. She wanted her to show the world what she could do. Lily was scared. She told her grandmother that she was not good enough. She said that other kids had fancy teachers and expensive instruments. She said no one would take her seriously, but her grandmother just squeezed her hand and looked into her eyes with so much love. She told Lily that talent was not about how much money you had or where you came from. It was about heart. It was about the fire inside you that refuses to go out no matter how hard the wind blows. She made Lily promise that she would enter that competition and give it everything she had. A few days later, her grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. Lily did not pick up her violin for 2 whole weeks after that. The apartment felt empty without her grandmother's voice. The silence was heavy. But then one night, Lily had a dream. In the dream, her grandmother was sitting by the window again, smiling, telling her to play. When Lily woke up, she knew what she had to do. She started practicing harder than ever before, every single day, morning and night. Her fingers hurt, her arms ached, but she did not stop. She practiced until the music became part of her, until she could play with her eyes closed, until the violin felt like it was speaking the words she could not say out loud. Her mother noticed the change. She watched her daughter transform from a heartbroken little girl into someone filled with purpose. Did not have much money. In fact, she barely had enough to pay the rent each month. But when Lily told her about the competition and the promise she made to her grandmother, knew she had to find a way. She picked up extra shifts. She worked holidays. She skipped buying new shoes for herself even though her old ones had holes in them. After months of saving every single coin, she finally had enough to buy 2 bus tickets to the city where the competition was being held. The journey took almost 9 hours. Lily and her mother sat in the back of the bus, watching the world pass by through the window. Lily held her violin case on her lap the entire time. She barely slept. Her mind kept thinking about what was waiting for her. When they finally arrived in the big city, Lily had never seen so many tall buildings in her life. Everything was loud and bright and overwhelming. People rushed past them on the streets like they were all late for something important, held Lily's hand tightly as they made their way to the competition venue. The building was enormous. It looked like something out of a movie. There were cameras everywhere and people in fancy clothes walking around with clipboards. Lily saw other kids her age, some even younger, warming up with their instruments. Many of them had coaches standing beside them, giving them last-minute advice. Some had parents who looked rich and confident. Lily looked down at her old violin case. The leather was peeling at the corners. The handle was held together with tape. She suddenly felt very small, very out of place. Knelt down beside her and lifted her chin gently. She told Lily that it did not matter what anyone else had. It did not matter if their violins cost $1,000 or their clothes were brand new. What mattered was what was inside her heart. She reminded Lily of her grandmother's words. She told her that she was here for a reason. Lily took a deep breath and nodded. They registered at the front desk and were given a number. Lily was contestant number 214. The woman at the desk barely looked at them. She just handed over a sticker and pointed toward the waiting area. As Lily walked through the crowded hallway toward the backstage area, she could hear the sounds of other performers practicing. A boy was playing piano somewhere nearby. A girl was singing scales. The air was thick with nerves and excitement. Lily found a quiet corner and sat down with her violin. She opened the case slowly and looked at the instrument that had been with her through so much. She ran her fingers over the wood, feeling the small cracks that she and her grandmother had filled with glue. She closed her eyes and whispered quietly to herself. She told her grandmother that she was here. She told her that she would keep her promise. A few minutes later, a voice over the loudspeaker called her number. It was time. Lily stood up, held her violin close, and walked toward the stage. She had no idea that in just a few minutes, her life was about to change forever. Lily walked down the long hallway toward the stage. Her footsteps echoed against the cold floor. With every step, her heart beat a little faster. She could hear the crowd on the other side of the curtain. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, all of them waiting to watch, all of them ready to judge. A staff member with a headset guided her to a spot just behind the curtain. He told her to wait there until her name was called. Then he disappeared, leaving her standing alone in the darkness. Lily clutched her violin case against her chest. Her hands were shaking. Her mouth felt dry. She tried to remember everything her grandmother had taught her. She tried to focus on the music, but her mind kept racing with fear. What if she forgot the notes? What if her fingers slipped? What if everyone laughed at her? She peeked through a tiny gap in the curtain and saw the stage. It was huge, bigger than anything she had ever seen. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, pointing down like giant eyes. In the center of the stage was a single microphone stand and a small spotlight. And then she saw the judges. There were 3 of them sitting behind a long table near the front of the audience. The first judge was a tall man with silver hair and a serious face. He was famous in the music world. People called him the toughest judge in the country. He almost never smiled, and he was known for pressing his red buzzer within seconds if he did not like a performance. The second judge was a woman with short black hair and sharp eyes. She had been a professional musician for over 30 years. She had played in concert halls all over the world. Her standards were incredibly high, and very few young performers ever impressed her. The third judge was a man who used to be a pianist. He seemed kinder than the other two, but Lily had watched old episodes of this competition online. She knew that even he could be harsh when he wanted to be. Lily felt her stomach twist into knots. Suddenly, a voice boomed through the speakers. It announced her name and her contestant number. This was it. There was no turning back now. The curtain opened, and Lily stepped out onto the stage. The lights hit her immediately. They were so bright that she could barely see the audience. All she could make out were dark shapes sitting in rows that seemed to stretch on forever. The silence was deafening. Everyone was staring at her. She walked slowly toward the center of the stage. Her legs felt heavy, like they were made of stone. The spotlight followed her every move. She had never felt so exposed in her entire life. When she reached the microphone, she stopped. She looked out at the sea of faces. Somewhere out there, her mother was sitting in the audience, watching, hopping, praying. One of the judges spoke into his microphone. He asked her name and age. Lily leaned toward the microphone and answered in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper. The judge asked her to speak up. She tried again, a little louder this time. The judge then asked what she was going to play for them today. Lily told them she would be playing a classical piece on her violin. The silver-haired judge raised an eyebrow. The woman judge looked unimpressed. The third judge gave her a small nod. Then the silver-haired judge waved his hand and told her to begin. Lily stepped back from the microphone. She opened her violin case with trembling fingers. When she pulled out the instrument, she noticed the judges glancing at each other. She knew what they were thinking. Her violin looked old and worn compared to the shiny, expensive instruments other kids had been playing. She placed the violin under her chin. She lifted the bow. She took a deep breath. And then she started to play. The first few notes came out okay. A little shaky, but not terrible. Lily tried to focus. She tried to remember the hours of practice. She tried to hear her grandmother's voice in her head, guiding her, encouraging her. But the lights were so bright. The silence was so heavy. The weight of all those eyes on her was crushing. Her fingers started to slip. The bow wobbled in her hand. A note came out wrong, then another. The sound was scratchy and uneven. It echoed through the auditorium like a cry for help. Lily panicked. She tried to recover, but her hands would not cooperate. Her mind went blank. The music that had flowed so easily in her tiny apartment was now stuck somewhere deep inside her, refusing to come out. She heard whispers from the audience. Someone coughed. A child in the front row covered their ears. And then it happened. The silver-haired judge reached forward and pressed his red buzzer. A loud, harsh sound filled the auditorium. It was the sound of rejection, the sound of failure. A second later, the woman judge pressed her buzzer too. Then the third judge, the one who had seemed kind, slowly shook his head and pressed his buzzer as well. 3 red lights glowed on the judge's table. 3 strikes. It was over. The audience fell into an uncomfortable silence. Some people looked away, embarrassed for her. Others whispered to each other, shaking their heads. A few even started to gather their things, ready to leave before the next performer came on. Lily stood frozen in the spotlight. Her violin hung limply at her side. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of all these people. The host of the show, a man in a fancy suit, started walking toward her from the side of the stage. He had a sympathetic smile on his face. The kind of smile people give you when they feel sorry for you but do not know what to say. He was coming to send her off, to thank her for trying, to gently guide her away so the show could continue. Lily looked down at her violin. She saw the small cracks in the wood. She remembered her grandmother's hands helping her glue them back together. She remembered the promise she had made. She had promised to give it everything she had. She had promised to show the world what was inside her heart. and she had not done that, not even close. The host was getting closer now. In a few seconds he would reach her. He would put a hand on her shoulder. He would tell her it was okay. He would walk her off the stage, and that would be the end of her story. But something inside Lily refused to accept that. Something deep in her chest started to burn. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was something else. Something her grandmother had talked about. The fire that refuses to go out no matter how hard the wind blows. Lily thought about her mother sitting in the audience. She thought about all those extra shifts, all those sacrifices, all those months of saving just to get here. She thought about her grandmother in that hospital bed, holding her hand, believing in her even when she did not believe in herself. She thought about the broken violin that everyone said was worthless, the one that she and her grandmother had brought back to life with patience and love. No, this could not be how it ended. Lily lifted her head. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The host was just a few steps away now, still wearing that pitying smile. But before he could reach her, Lily did something no one expected. She raised her violin again. She positioned the bow on the strings. And in a voice that was small but steady, she spoke into the silence. "Please," she said, "that was not my real song. Please let me try again." The host stopped walking. The judges looked up from their papers. The audience, who had already written her off, turned their attention back to the tiny girl standing alone in the spotlight. No one knew it yet, but what happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in the history of the competition. The words hung in the air like smoke. "Please let me try again." No one moved. No one spoke. The entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath. The host stood frozen just a few feet away from Lily. His hand was still reaching out toward her shoulder, but he had stopped mid-step. He looked confused, like he did not know what to do. This had never happened before. No contestant had ever asked for a second chance after being buzzed out by all three judges. Lily kept her violin raised. Her arms were trembling, but she did not lower them. She stared straight ahead at the judges' table, waiting for an answer. The silver-haired judge leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. His face was hard to read. He looked annoyed, maybe even a little insulted. In all his years of judging, no one had ever challenged his decision like this. The woman judge whispered something to the man sitting next to her. She glanced at Lily with narrowed eyes, as if she was trying to figure out what this little girl was up to. The third judge, the former pianist, was the only one who seemed curious. He tilted his head slightly and studied Lily with interest. There was something in his eyes that looked almost like hope. Murmurs rippled through the audience. People were whispering to each other, wondering what was happening. Some seemed annoyed that the show was being delayed. Others leaned forward in their seats, suddenly interested in this unexpected turn of events. The host cleared his throat and looked toward the judges for guidance. He had no script for this moment. The rules were clear. Once all three buzzers went off, the performance was over. That was how it had always been. But something about this situation felt different. The silver-haired judge finally spoke. His voice was cold and sharp. He told Lily that the rules were the rules. He said that she had her chance, and it did not go well. He said that they had hundreds of other contestants waiting to perform, and it would not be fair to give her special treatment. Lily felt her heart sink. She had known it was a long shot. She had known they would probably say no. But hearing those words out loud still hurt more than she expected. She started to lower her violin. Maybe this really was the end. Maybe she had come all this way for nothing. Maybe her grandmother's belief in her had been misplaced. But then the third judge raised his hand. He spoke in a calm, gentle voice. He said that he had been doing this job for 15 years. He said that he had seen thousands of young performers come and go. Most of them played well, took their scores, and faded into the background. Very few of them had the courage to stand in front of a crowd like this and ask for another chance after failing. He looked at Lily and asked her a question. He asked her why she wanted to try again. What was so important about this performance that she was willing to risk even more embarrassment? Lily swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight. She did not know if she could find the right words, but she knew she had to try. She told them about her grandmother. She told them about the broken violin they had found at the market. She told them about the afternoons spent by the window, learning to play note by note. She told them about the promise she had made in that hospital room. Her voice cracked as she spoke. She was not trying to be dramatic. She was just telling the truth. And somehow that truth seemed to fill the entire auditorium. When she finished, there was silence again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was softer, heavier, the kind of silence that comes when people are actually listening. The third judge nodded slowly. He turned to his fellow judges and said that he thought they should let her play. He said that music was not just about technical skill. It was about heart, and this girl clearly had plenty of that. The woman judge sighed. She did not look convinced, but she did not argue either. She simply shrugged and said that if they were going to break the rules, they might as well do it properly. All eyes turned to the silver-haired judge. He was the one with the final say. If he refused, it was over. He stared at Lily for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. The seconds stretched out like hours. Then slowly, he uncrossed his arms. He leaned forward and spoke into his microphone. 1 minute, he said. You have 1 minute to show us something worth watching. If you waste our time again, you walk off this stage and you do not come back. Lily's heart nearly burst out of her chest. 1 minute. That was all she had. 60 seconds to prove that she belonged here. 60 seconds to keep her promise. She nodded quickly. She adjusted her grip on the violin. She placed the bow on the strings and closed her eyes. For a moment, she forgot about the judges. She forgot about the audience. She forgot about the bright lights and the cameras and the thousands of people watching from their homes. She let all of it fade away. In her mind, she was back in that small apartment. Sunlight was streaming through the window. Her grandmother was sitting beside her, smiling, telling her to play from her heart. And then she began. The first note rang out pure and clear. It cut through the silence like a beam of light breaking through storm clouds. It was nothing like the shaky, nervous sound she had made before. This was something else entirely. She was playing one of the most difficult pieces ever written for the violin. It was called Caprice No. 24 by. Professional musicians spent years trying to master it. Some never did. It required speed, precision, and control that most people did not think an 8-year-old could possibly have. But Lily played it like she had been born to do it. Her fingers danced across the strings with impossible speed. The notes flew from her violin in a cascade of sound that filled every corner of the auditorium. It was fast. It was fierce. It was breathtaking. The silver-haired judge sat up straight in his chair. His eyes went wide. The cold, unimpressed look on his face melted away into pure shock. The woman judge brought her hand to her mouth. She looked like she could not believe what she was hearing. Her head slowly turned toward her fellow judges, as if to confirm that this was real. The third judge smiled. A big, warm, knowing smile. Like he had seen a spark in this little girl from the very beginning and was now watching it burst into flames. In the audience, people started to rise from their seats. One by one, they stood up, drawn to their feet by the power of the music. Mouths hung open. Hands covered hearts. Tears began to fall down cheeks. Backstage had pushed her way to the edge of the curtain so she could see her daughter. Her hands were pressed together like she was praying. Tears streamed down her face as she watched Lily transform before her eyes. This was not the nervous little girl who had stumbled through her first attempt. This was someone else, someone fierce, someone unstoppable, Someone who had taken all of her pain, all of her love, all of her loss and turned it into music. The 1 minute the judge had given her came and went, but no one stopped her. No one pressed their buzzer. No one even moved. Because everyone in that auditorium knew they were witnessing something special, something that did not come along very often, something that would be talked about for years to come. Lily played on, her small body swaying with the music, her eyes still closed, completely lost in the world she was creating with her grandmother's violin. And she was only getting started. The music poured out of Lily like water from a broken dam. Every note was alive. Every sound carried a piece of her soul. The violin that had once been broken and forgotten was now singing in a way that made the whole world stop and listen. Her fingers moved so fast they were almost a blur. The bow glided across the strings with perfect control. She hit every note, every turn, every impossible passage that had defeated musicians twice her age. But it was not just the technical skill that left people speechless. It was the feeling behind it. You could hear the pain in her music, the loss, the loneliness of those nights after her grandmother passed away, but you could also hear something else: hope, love, the kind of fierce determination that refuses to die no matter what life throws at it. The silver-haired judge had not blinked in over a minute. He sat completely still, his mouth slightly open, his eyes fixed on this tiny girl who was doing the impossible right in front of him. In all his years of judging competitions around the world, he had never seen anything like this. The woman judge had given up trying to hide her emotions. Tears were streaming down her face. She did not wipe them away. She just let them fall as she listened to music that seemed to reach into her chest and grab hold of her heart. The third judge was nodding along with the melody. His fingers tapped gently on the table, as if he was playing an invisible piano alongside her. The smile on his face had grown so wide it looked like it might never go away. In the audience, people were holding on to each other. Strangers who had never met before were gripping the hands of the person sitting next to them. Some had their eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Others stared at the stage like they were watching a miracle happen in real time. A woman in the third row was crying so hard her shoulders shook. A man near the back had taken off his glasses to wipe his eyes. A little boy sitting with his father tugged on his sleeve and whispered that he wanted to learn violin just like that girl on stage. Backstage had fallen to her knees. She could not stand anymore. The emotion was too much. She watched her daughter through the gap in the curtain, and she saw someone she barely recognized. This was not the shy little girl who was afraid of everything. This was a warrior, a fighter, someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side shining brighter than ever. Thought about all those nights when Lily practiced until her fingers bled. She thought about the times when Lily wanted to give up, when she said she was not good enough, when she cried herself to sleep missing her grandmother. And now, here she was, standing on the biggest stage of her life, proving every doubter wrong. On stage, Lily felt herself entering a place she had never been before. It was like the rest of the world had disappeared. There was no audience, no judges, no cameras. There was only the music and the memory of her grandmother standing right beside her. She could almost feel her grandmother's presence, a warmth on her shoulder, a gentle whisper in her ear, "Keep going, my darling. You are doing beautifully. Show them who you are." And then Lily did something that no one expected. She finished the piece with a flourish that made the audience gasp. But instead of stopping, she paused for just a breath and began to play something new, something different, something that no one in that auditorium had ever heard before. It was her own composition, a piece she had written herself in the weeks after her grandmother died. She had never played it for anyone, not even her mother. It was too personal, too raw, but somehow in this moment it felt right to share it with the world. The melody started soft and gentle. It was built around an old hymn that her grandmother used to hum while she cooked dinner. Lily had woven that simple tune into something much bigger, something that told the story of her grandmother's life, her love, her wisdom, and her peaceful passing. The shift in the music was so powerful that several people in the audience let out quiet sobs. This was not a performance anymore. This was a conversation between a little girl and the grandmother she had lost. It was a goodbye, a thank you, a promise that she would never be forgotten. The melody rose and fell like waves on the ocean. Sometimes it was quiet, almost like a whisper. Other times it swelled with such intensity that it seemed to fill every inch of the auditorium. Lily poured everything she had into those notes, all her grief, all her love, all her dreams for the future. The silver-haired judge did something he had not done in 15 years of judging. He closed his eyes and simply listened. For the first time in a very long time, he was not analyzing technique or looking for mistakes. He was just feeling the music, and it moved him in ways he did not think were possible anymore. The woman judge had stopped trying to compose herself. She was openly weeping now, not caring who saw. She would later tell reporters that in her 30 years as a professional musician, she had never experienced anything as pure and honest as what that little girl played on that stage. The third judge reached up and placed his hand over his heart. He understood what Lily was doing. He understood that this was more than a competition. This was a tribute, a memorial, a gift to someone who could no longer hear it but whose spirit was very much alive in every note. Backstage was praying. She did not know what else to do. She thanked God for her daughter. She thanked her mother for believing in Lily even when no one else did. She thanked the universe for giving her this moment, this beautiful, impossible, perfect moment. The stagehands had stopped working. The camera operators had stopped adjusting their equipment. Everyone behind the scenes was frozen, caught in the spell of the music. Some of them had tears in their eyes too. They had seen hundreds of performances on this stage, but nothing like this. Nothing even close. In the front row, a retired music teacher sat with her hand pressed against her chest. She had come to the competition expecting to see talented kids play their instruments. She had not expected to be changed. But that is exactly what was happening. Lily's music was changing everyone who heard it. The piece built slowly toward its climax. The notes came faster now, more intense, more urgent. It was like watching a storm gather strength before releasing all its power at once. The violin sang out with a voice that seemed bigger than one small instrument could possibly produce. And then, at the very peak, when the emotion had reached its highest point, Lily played a final run of notes that climbed higher and higher until they seemed to touch the sky itself. The last note rang out across the auditorium. It hung in the air, pure and perfect, vibrating with everything Lily had put into it. She held it for what felt like an eternity, letting it speak all the words she could never say out loud. And then slowly, gently, she let the note fade into silence. She lowered her violin. She opened her eyes, and for the first time since she started playing, she looked out at the audience. For one long heartbeat, no one made a sound. The silence was so complete you could hear your own breathing. It was as if the whole world had paused, not quite ready to let go of what they had just experienced. Then someone in the back row started to clap. Another person joined in, then another, and another. Within seconds, the applause spread through the auditorium like wildfire. People were not just clapping, they were cheering, they were shouting, they were stamping their feet on the ground. The entire audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the building itself. But Lily barely heard any of it. She was looking up at the ceiling, tears finally falling down her cheeks, whispering two words that only she could hear. "For you, Grandma." The applause went on and on. It rolled through the auditorium like thunder that refused to stop. People were on their feet, clapping until their hands hurt, cheering until their voices cracked. Some were still crying. Others were laughing with pure joy. Everyone felt like they had just witnessed something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Lily stood in the center of the stage, her violin hanging loosely at her side. She did not know what to do. She had never experienced anything like this before. The sound of all those people cheering for her was almost too much to take in. Her legs felt weak. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. The host walked toward her, but this time there was no pitying smile on his face. This time, he looked at her with pure amazement. He stopped beside her and put his hand gently on her shoulder. He had to wait almost 2 full minutes before the audience calmed down enough for him to speak. When he finally raised the microphone to his lips, his voice was shaky with emotion. He said that in all his years of hosting this competition, he had never seen a moment like this. He said that everyone in the building had just witnessed something truly special. Then he turned to the judges and asked for their comments. The third judge spoke first. He leaned into his microphone and took a deep breath before saying anything. He told Lily that when she first walked onto that stage, he saw a scared little girl holding a beaten-up violin. He admitted that he had doubted her. He said that when she made those early mistakes, he thought she was just another kid who was not ready for this level of competition. But then he paused. His eyes grew soft. He told her that what she did next changed his mind forever. He said that asking for a second chance took more courage than most adults would ever have. And what she played after that was not just music. It was magic. Pure, honest, heartbreaking magic. He told her that her grandmother would be so proud of her. And then his voice cracked, and he had to stop talking because he was too moved to continue. The audience clapped again, softer this time, giving him space to collect himself. The woman judge went next. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before speaking. She told Lily that she had performed on stages all over the world. She had played for presidents and kings. She had heard the greatest musicians of her generation. But she had never, in all her years, heard anything that touched her heart the way Lily's performance did tonight. She said that music was supposed to make people feel something. That was its purpose. That was its power. And Lily had done that better than anyone she had ever seen. Then she said something that made the audience gasp. She told Lily that the original piece she played at the end, the one she wrote for her grandmother, was one of the most beautiful compositions she had ever heard. She asked Lily if she had written it all by herself. Lily nodded shyly. The woman judge shook her head in disbelief. She said that kind of talent could not be taught. It could only come from somewhere deep inside. She told Lily to never stop writing, never stop creating. The world needed more music like hers. Finally, it was the silver-haired judge's turn to speak. The auditorium fell completely silent. Everyone knew his reputation. Everyone knew how harsh he could be. He was the one who had pressed his buzzer first. He was the one who had told Lily that rules were rules. No one knew what he was going to say. He sat still for a long moment, just looking at Lily. His expression was impossible to read. Then slowly he stood up from his chair. The audience held its breath. He walked around the judge's table and made his way toward the stage. The host stepped aside to let him pass. The other 2 judges watched with wide eyes, just as confused as everyone else. The silver-haired judge climbed the steps and walked across the stage until he was standing right in front of Lily. He towered over her. She had to tilt her head all the way back just to see his face. And then, to everyone's shock, he did something no one had ever seen him do before. He got down on one knee so that he was at her eye level, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost soft. He told her that he had been doing this job for a very long time. He said that somewhere along the way, he had forgotten why he started. He had forgotten what music was supposed to be about. He had become so focused on technique and perfection that he had lost sight of the thing that mattered most. He told Lily that she had reminded him tonight. She had reminded him that music was about heart, about story, about the courage to share your soul with the world even when you are scared. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was a pin shaped like a golden musical note. He told her that it had been given to him by his own teacher many years ago, on the night of his first big performance. He had kept it with him ever since, as a reminder of where he came from. He pressed the pin into Lily's hand and closed her fingers around it. He told her that she deserved it more than he ever did. The audience erupted again. People were crying openly now. The host was wiping his eyes. Even the camera operators were struggling to keep their composure. When the scores were announced a few minutes later, no one was surprised. Lily received the highest marks in the 20-year history of the competition. It was not even close. She had won by a landslide. But the moment that would be replayed millions of times in the weeks to come was not the announcement of her victory. It was what happened right after. The host handed Lily the microphone and asked if she wanted to say anything. She stood there for a moment, looking out at the sea of faces. Then she spoke in a clear, steady voice. She said that she almost did not come here today. She said that there were so many times when she wanted to give up, when she thought she was not good enough, when she felt like her dreams were too big for someone like her. But her grandmother never let her quit. Her grandmother always told her that even if you are small, even if people do not believe in you, your dreams are still worth fighting for. She held up her old violin for everyone to see. She told them that this instrument was broken when she found it. Everyone said it was worthless. But she and her grandmother fixed it together, piece by piece, and now it had taken her further than she ever imagined. She looked directly into the camera and said that if there was anyone out there who felt like they were too small, too poor, too different, or too broken to chase their dreams, she wanted them to know something. You are not. Your dreams matter. Your story matters. You matter. And if you keep fighting, if you never give up, one day you will get your chance to shine, just like she did. The auditorium exploded with applause one final time. Backstage ran onto the stage and wrapped her daughter in the hug of her life. Mother and daughter stood together in the spotlight, holding each other, crying tears of joy. Somewhere up above, Lily was sure her grandmother was watching. She could almost hear her voice whispering through the applause. I always knew you could do it, my darling. I always knew. And for the first time in a long time, Lily smiled. Not because she had won, not because she was famous now, but because she had kept her promise. She had shown the world what was inside her heart. And that was the greatest victory of all.